Hagen Tollway Jam, 31 to Eola and Raymond to Yackley. The northbound Veterans Memorial, I-55 moves the way to St. Charles, and from the Army Trail toll to 290. That's traffic. I'm Jim Calamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center. Beautiful sunshine this morning. We'll mix in some clouds throughout the day. High 42. Currently, we have 33. Next news coming up at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by In the Know with Wealth Management Group, hosted by Craig Bolanos. Heard Sunday mornings at 10.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2 on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Trump in Kentucky last night rallying the faithful in advance of today's election for Matt Bevin, an important Republican governor. His reelection, I think he'll be reelected. If he's not reelected, that could spell not good. Gathering storm for President Trump, thus the need to help rally the faithful. And he was joined by his on-again, off-again friend, Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky.
They're getting along well right now, so let's enjoy this.
Well, especially right now when Rand Paul gets up on the stage and serves as the president's surrogate on all things impeachment.
President Trump has great courage. He faces down the fake media every day. But Congress needs to step up and have equal courage to defend the president.
And certainly the last week or so, House and Senate Republicans have been exhibiting much more of what Rand Paul is calling for. He also had a specific message to the media as it pertains to the so-called whistleblower.
The whistleblower needs to come before Congress as a material witness because he worked for Joe Biden at the same time Hunter Biden was getting money from corrupt oligarchs. I say tonight to the media, do your job and print his name.
And the collective response from me was no. And then Rand Paul said something else Republicans should do if this is going to continue to be a farce, the whole process.
If Shifty Schiff will not let Hunter Biden come, and if he will not bring the whistleblower forward, every Republican in Congress should take a walk and say, this is a farce.
For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Adam Mill. He is a labor attorney, also a contributor to The Federalist, American Greatness, The Daily Caller. He's written on the topic of one Mr. Schiff and the Democrats. Adam, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor.
So with respect to what Rand Paul was suggesting, do you think that Schiff's antics so far, his administration of this process so far, provides the cover for Republicans to take the action that Rand Paul suggested?
That's a really great question. The fact is that the Democrats are in charge of the House, and regardless of what the Republicans do, they have the ability to continue with the process. But, I'm working on a piece right now, and if you have a Democrat friend or if you have somebody who supports impeachment, I have 5 questions that I would ask these individuals, in a thoughtful, non-argumentative way. Okay. And I think the first question that we need to start with is, should Joe Biden be immune from the consequences if he, as suspected, threatened to withhold aid to the Ukraine to enforce his demand to remove the prosecutor investigating his son's Ukrainian company? John Solomon.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen it yet,
Yep.
but there's a lot of there on this, and we haven't even started talking about China yet. So that seems like a matter of public concern, and I guess the second question is.
Well, Adam, just I could hold you 1 second there. I just want to understand the rules of the game. Now, will they be allowed to have counsel present, or will it be like Mike Pompeo, and you will not allow Democrats to have counsel present to answer these questions?
So if the Democrats do issue a subpoena, for one of these witnesses, and the president is not being allowed to be represented at the process. The president, I think, has taken the position that he's not going to participate in a star chamber. He's not going to participate in and he's going to instruct his administration not to participate in a process that's secret.
No, I know, but I'm saying the questions you're presenting for Democrats to answer, are those Democrats going to be allowed to have counsel present, or are you going to reject that? I just want to understand.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a non-adversarial thing. And I mean, look, if don't answer the questions to me, but ask the questions to yourselves, like the people who are supporting impeachment. Just at least stop and think about what is being done here. So I don't know if so the second question I would have asked is, what's wrong with the president asking about the shenanigans of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden? Look, Bill Barr, the Attorney General, came to the president and said, I need to expand this investigation into other countries. And he asked for an introduction to the president of Ukraine, Australia, I think also Italy. And so Barr, according to protocol, asked the president to make contact with the leader, and then that would allow him to work with his counterpart in those countries. And that Ukraine call, that's how that started. So then the other question I would ask is, what crime is the president being investigated for? If you go back and look at the the resolution authorizing the impeachment, there's nothing in there that says what crime's being investigated. It doesn't mention Ukraine. It doesn't mention Stormy Daniels. It's just, we're going to start up an inquiry and keep looking for something until we find something to get them on.
And how do you think Adam Schiff is handling this impeachment process? I mean, we all were very much well aware of the parody that he did on, during the first House committee hearing. But where has it gone since then?
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. That's a great question. Why is Adam Schiff even in charge of this at all? He's the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. What has this got to do with intelligence? Plus, I wrote an article about how these criticisms of the process being secret, how the president is not being allowed to be represented the way it was with Nixon and Clinton. Those arguments are really biting with a lot of thoughtful liberals, people who keep saying they believe in the rule of law, following precedent and norms, and Adam Schiff has not been following those norms and those precedents that were established in the Nixon and Clinton impeachments. And the last question, yes, sir.
Go ahead. Go ahead with your last question.
Well, and I think the last question I would ask my liberal friends, and I do have a lot of liberal friends and family members, is, look, this isn't going to reach resolution until sometime in the spring of next year if it goes all the way to the Senate. So, okay, well, then an election is just a few months after that. We're down now within a year from today is the next election. So why, explain to the voter why it is we're taking the decision about whether Donald Trump gets another 4 years away from the voter. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're really just shortening his term by a matter of months.
Well, another question too, if I can maybe add some questions to your piece. So, do you believe in accountability? Should people be accountable when they say something is certain and it turns out to be certainly wrong? And by that, I'm asking, does Adam Schiff, these same players that were permanent fixtures on the cable news channels for 2.5 years talking about evidence of the president colluding with the Russians, and it's right around the corner, and I've got it, and we're going to present it, and then the Mueller report comes out, and everything that they had said for 2.5 years was wrong, or at least there was no evidence to support it. I mean, does that create any doubt in your mind about the legitimacy of these same people prosecuting this next case?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're bringing up an excellent point, and that goes back to why Adam Schiff. Isn't there another member of the House who doesn't have a pending ethics complaint against him for this parody of the phone call that was inaccurate, for lying about the contact with the whistleblower, and as you just pointed out, for the misstatements about the Russia collusion hoax? I mean, isn't there somebody in the House that they can get, somebody on the Judiciary Committee, somebody on one of these other committees that doesn't have 4 Pinocchios laid on him about the Russia collusion hoax by the Washington Post? I just don't understand why they would pick him.
There's also been some really reckless comparisons made, and by otherwise respected commentators. And Peggy Noonan's comes to mind most recently, suggesting that analogous to the president's call with Ukrainian President Zelensky would have been if FDR had said to Churchill, yeah, I'll send the ships, we'll do this Lend-Lease thing right after your government announces they're investigating Wendell Willkie. Well, of course, I mean, that fails on so many counts to be analogous to what Trump and Zelensky did and what the outcome was. It's really embarrassing that somebody like Noonan would suggest such a thing. By the way, starting with the point that Wendell Willkie supported the policy of Lend-Lease. But there's so many things. But you have serious people that have also sort of lost their attachment to sanity with respect to this impeachment process and are not asking any of the questions of themselves that you just suggest to be asked clearly.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I'm not in this camp of people who tries to say no quid pro quo or that, he didn't follow through on his threat. I'm of the position that if you have a vice president who demands that a prosecutor gets fired, in a foreign country, meddles in that prosecution, and he does it for the benefit of his son, then you're darn right our Department of Justice ought to look into that, and you're darn right that a president would be totally within his rights to say, we're gonna hold up the aid to get your attention, to focus your attention on how important this is to us. We can't have a foreign policy. Just imagine if every diplomat around the world takes a little side action for his kid or his wife or his cousin, essentially accepting a bribe. What would our foreign policy look like? And I mean, you start asking some questions. Are there some foreign policy choices that our establishment is making that don't align with the voters or the president's policy? And I think that this might be the answer. We need a foreign policy that's guided by American interests, not the sons and daughters of these ambassadors or administration officials. So yes, I have no problem with the president saying we're going to hold up aid until we get to the bottom of this, because this is a serious problem.
Can you compare that phone call though to what Hillary Clinton did? I mean, she used her campaign funds to hire Christopher Steele to investigate Trump.
Yeah, you're making the point that I made in my in a recent piece, which is, look, if we're gonna start saying this phone call with Trump is somehow a crime, then what about everybody connected to the Steele dossier, which, by the way, was partially funded by FBI informant fees that they were paying Christopher Steele at the time. Taxpayer money was being used to help gin up opposition research against Donald Trump. So I don't understand how, Alan Dershowitz talks about the shoe on the other foot rule. I don't understand how anyone can articulate anything wrong with this phone call that doesn't apply 10 times over to what was done against Donald Trump in the Russia collusion hoax. Your point is well taken.
Yeah, but unfortunately you have sort of an ends justify the means politics going on, and that is going to leave a lot of people looking silly when, somebody that they like at present is faced with a challenge similar to somebody they don't like at present. But this is unfortunately how short-sighted a lot of people are. I wanted to get to the John Solomon report. We talked about it a bit earlier, but I want to get your take on it too. Sort of remarkable, especially again against the backdrop of Joe Biden just this weekend denying to Judy Woodruff on PBS that he knew Hunter was on the board of Purisima, which frankly runs in contradiction to what Hunter said he and his dad talked about. But okay. We all find John Solomon through a FOIA lawsuit finds that there was an effort by Purisima in February 2016 to have a meeting with an undersecretary of state for the purposes of getting the Obama administration to back off on the corruption allegations against Purisima. And in this, in the information that John Solomon obtained, Hunter Biden's name is specifically mentioned as an influential U.S. citizen who's involved with Purisima.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking. And you go back to an earlier report from John Solomon when he reported that the very same meeting that was held at the White House with the prosecutor from Ukraine, in which he was encouraged to back off the Purisima investigation, that was the same meeting that they asked him to go after Paul Manafort. And a lot of people forget Ukraine produced a phony, forged black ledger against Manafort that was so obviously false and fraudulent that the that the Mueller team refused to use it. They didn't introduce it into evidence. They couldn't sponsor it because it didn't match with existing bank records. This is exactly the shoe on the other foot scenario that Trump is being accused of right now. And, where's the outrage about that?
Or compare this effort to have this meeting and what you're describing was going on in Ukraine, that Politico reported on 2 years ago. Compare that to how a meeting with a Russian attorney, Veselnitskaya, was so central to the Mueller investigation, the Trump Tower meeting, and to the Democrats' talking points for 2 years. And that turned out to be a big nothing burger. So if we're going to have, even meetings as something that could be that could implicate collusive practices, impeachable actions, then what about all this related to Ukraine and the Bidens and the State Department, the Obama administration?
Well, Veselnitskaya was in partnership with Fusion GPS.
Right.
The opposition research she used as bait to get Donald Trump Jr. into that meeting, that was produced by Fusion GPS. So why would a company that was working for Hillary Clinton produce dirt on Hillary Clinton? I mean, it was a lure. It was a bait to get them in the room with somebody who was Russian, even if it was a long-time partner. Both of the Russians in the room were longtime partners with Fusion GPS.
He is Adam Mill. He's a labor employment attorney. He's contributor to The Federalist, American Greatness, and The Daily Caller. Check out his pieces at The Federalist on the topics that we've covered. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of nature. Changing the world